Vincent,
Yes.
what is real?
What is real? Real is what there is. um, that's really the question that the yoga is all about, is to discover what is real. And what is real, my euphemism for it, my euphemism du jour is radiant presence, which again doesn't define it or answer that question, and yet it indicates it in a way. The question has no answer that can be said, but it has a very specific and very precise answer. And the whole point of yoga is to discover that answer. And one discovers it by looking at what is real, what is present, which is, of course, starting with the field of experience and looking to see what that is. And if you see what it is, you will discover the answer to that question. But you won't ever be able to put an answer in words other than just regurgitating more metaphors and euphemisms.
Can you say what it isn't?
There's nothing that it isn't. Anything and everything that appears ultimately is nothing other than real. However, what it actually is not what you're likely to think that it is.
So it's the thinking.
Thinking is real. It's just that no, even the content of thinking is not a problem. The problem is the idea that the content of thinking is definitive, is comprehensive. And it's not, because of the inherent nature of what is real is that it is infinite. And infinity cannot be comprehensively grasped by concepts. It cannot be comprehensively grasped by symbols. It can be indicated by symbols, but it cannot be defined or grasped by symbols. And concepts, if you use them erroneously, that is, as if they were definitive, creates delusion, i.e. confusion, i.e. misinterpretation of what is real with the assumption that it conforms to the definition of the words you're using. And reality does not conform to any definitions of any words whatsoever.
Would you say that it's necessary to, in order to see what's real, to see through the viewpoint that believes that the viewpoint is real?
I'm not sure I followed what you meant by that.
It seems as if a viewpoint that...
What do you mean by a viewpoint?
A way of not confronting reality, but experiencing reality.
So a framework of interpretation? Is that what you mean by viewpoint?
Well, it's... Okay. The belief that a center from which a viewpoint erroneously thinks it is stemming from.
You mean spatial center?
Experiential,
okay.
Intellectual.
Yeah, well, if you think there's a center, you're defining that center into existence because no actual center can be found. So again, I would define that as a interpretive framework, or the sort of shorthand word I use for that is a worldview.
Doesn't that have to be broken down first?
You don't need to break it down. When you see what it actually is, that it automatically invalidates what it isn't. So all erroneous worldviews, and all worldviews are erroneous, are seen through simply by seeing what reality is. So rather than deconstructing worldviews, it's much simpler just to see what actually is, and then you'll discover the way in which no worldview can possibly conform to it.
But I mean, just in order to see what is.
In order to see what is what?
It seems almost impossible to see what is when it's seen from a viewpoint.
Well, it never is seen. It never is seen from a viewpoint. The viewpoint claims that it's seen from a viewpoint, which is part of the viewpoint.
Right. It's
But
in the way.
It's not actually in the way. It pretends to be in the way, but it's not in the way, because the reality is seen from the perspective of reality always, already. And there may or may not be viewpoints present, frames of reference, interpretive frames of reference, but those interpretive frames of reference are present within what is being viewed. They are present within reality. That they are not, nothing is seen from them, nothing is seen through them, nothing is stuck with having to look through an interpretive frame of reference. If a frame of reference is present, it's like this cup of tea being present. It's here, but I don't have to see through it. It's just present, and all sorts of other conditions are also present, and they don't impinge on each other whatsoever.
But it's interpreted.
But
it's interpreted.
It may be interpreted, sure. I mean, that's what makes it an interpretive frame of reference, is that it implies an interpretation. An interpretive frame of reference is perhaps analogous to the plot line of a movie or of a novel. You may have a favorite novel that you know the plot line too intimately, and you may be able to go visit it in your imagination anytime you want. But it's there, but you're not stuck with it in any sense. It's just something that is present. And seeing that is the case is seeing reality. Thoughts and concepts and beliefs and interpretive frameworks are present within reality. They do not address reality. They do not refer to reality. They simply are present as expressions of reality. But a great deal other than them is also simultaneously present as an expression of reality. Because the nature of reality is infinitely multidimensional in terms of not just what it is, but how it presents. So there's always literally infinite information, infinite, call it experiential characteristics being presented. And no frame of reference is broad enough to try to catch all that.
It just seems so different when there's like a centerlessness as opposed to the feeling of a center.
Mm-hmm.
And that feeling of a center seems so unconscious and so believable when it's happening.
Sure.
That it's like just covering everything.
Sure.
But
it doesn't actually. It almost does. And this is the advantage. It's it's a lot like losing yourself. To go back to the analogy I just gave, or is it a simile? To go back to the metaphor I just gave of your favorite novel. You can lose yourself in your favorite novel, and all of a sudden you're there and you're like sweating bullets, and your protagonist is in trouble, and the whole deal, right? You're just lost in the thing. Yeah, you can identify with it. You can go right into it, but you never are actually in it. And since you're not actually in it, it's possible to notice that fact. And once you notice that fact, then of course you discover you're not in it. And likewise with these frames of reference. Since you aren't actually in them, it is possible to notice that you're not. If you are karmically so attached, let's call it, that it is impossible for you to actually do that, then that is the nature of your karmic situation, and not much can be done about it. On the other hand, that's all good because it takes care of itself. It's a self-correcting system. But everyone experiences outside their frame of reference, outside their interpretive frame of reference all the time. But perhaps a large number of people discount that experience as irrelevant or as noise in the system or as being distracted or as nothing, and they devalue it and write it off rather than appreciate the opportunity that it is to have a naked presentation of reality outside the context of a frame of reference, which is the whole trick, the whole mechanism of this yoga that I present.
Well, it actually seems huge, that change from one to the other.
It is huge.
Yeah.
What reality is mind-bogglingly, amazingly, astoundingly, superlatively bizarre, wonderful, amazing, ecstatic, supply your own expletives. What could be cooler? And the very nature of interpretive frames of reference is censorious. They censor it. They limit it. They carve out chunks of it and pretend to throw them away or deny them, or hypnotize you to ignore them. So it's a vast. To notice this is incredible. Feels like an incredible opening and expansion, because all of a sudden, the nature of reality is so vastly, inconceivably, astoundingly open and inclusive and endlessly generous and so on and so forth. And there's a major wow factor involved for sure.
I guess I was just trying to point to the actual seeing.
It's all about the seeing. It's all about the seeing. But again, the seeing is always possible because everyone is always doing it. Again, it's a matter of recognizing that is the case.
They're always doing it?
Sure, because there's nothing to see but reality, so reality is always being seen. And reality is as it is if you have the wit to notice that fact. I don't mean you, I mean one.
I don't think you can see it unless you have broken through that barrier.
Well, that may seem to be the case, sure.
And it's the getting to that point, the breaking through, the opening up, and the seeing.
Sure.
And
it's all about the seeing. By hook or by crook, you got to get to the seeing.
So, it's interesting. You seem to approach it from the positive endpoint access, which is like from the endpoint of just opening yourself up to what you're going to see anyway.
Right.
As opposed to a real laser kind of pinpointing of what it is that is the thoughts that are in the way that create a center that prevent that openness.
Well, I point to that very directly, which is that any and all thoughts that pretend to be true, that pretend to refer to some condition in any way whatsoever that is held to be that way, is the problem, is error, is wrong, is the nature of delusion. So in other words, anything that you think you know what it is, or you feel like you know what it is, and again, I don't mean you, I mean one, is the problem. That's what frames of reference are made of. And they aren't ultimately a problem, but in this context they are that which impedes recognizing or noticing this astounding condition. Excuse me, miss, would you please try and contain yourself? No passing notes in class.
And yet the irony is a clear seeing where you do see something, and you know that you see something, and then it just disappears because it was not true.
It can seem to, yeah, sure, all that.
So it's like
that's part of the challenge. The very nature of reality is that it cannot be found as anything stable, or anything permanent, or anything that is even coherent. So even when one stumbles upon reality, one may not recognize it because it seems so incredibly elusive and strange and It's like trying to find a mirage. You go right up to it. And where is it? It was right here. What happened to it? And that's the very nature of reality. You can't ever find it. On the other hand, you can't ever lose it, so that's not really a problem. but the nature of what reality is so strange in contrast with what we're used to interpreting it as from within these frames of reference, that that contrast can be quite a challenge. Because if one is used to relating to one's being from within an interpretive framework, what one actually is in this astounding context is almost unrecognizably bizarre and weird and inconceivable. So it may literally be unrecognizable, even if it's recognized, just because it doesn't even look like anything. It's just so weird. It's not just different. It's entirely different in every way conceivable and inconceivable.
Well, our mind, our intellect is so incredible. It can force all these things into a believable, workable reality that seems to be ridiculous.
Sure.
And you don't even know you're doing it.
Sure, we're all very familiar with this, sure.
You really think this is the way reality is.
Sure.
So,
and it's reality itself that does that.
yeah.
So this itself is more revelation of the astounding weirdness of reality. The whole thing is just endlessly bizarre.
There's a real control factor going on, making it all work just right.
Sure, there can seem to be. But of course, in reality, nothing is controllable, and everything is exactly and precisely the way that it is, which makes the whole issue of control entirely irrelevant. Although from within these frames of reference, it can seem to be very relevant. But it turns out to be a complete fantasy and fabrication.
I've gone to the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
I found my trousers,
Mm-hmm.
my keys, where I parked my car,
Mm-hmm.
the roads to get me there,
Uh-huh.
the parking spot even, a
Wow.
basket. I filled it with crap that I thought or convinced myself I needed.
Mm-hmm.
I reversed all that, put it in my refrigerator and pantry at home. I found shit. I nailed it.
Yep.
And when I was hungry, which I'll grant you wasn't my doing, I prepared it and ate it.
Sure.
I found the toilet.
Yeah.
What are you talking
Congratulations.
about?
Well,
I found it.
Sure.
I nailed it day after day.
Sure. That narration, in terms of that narration, if it were true, would be very accurate and complete. But it's not. It's the narration is not what actually happened. Let's call it.
Yeah.
In terms of what your narration pretends to describe, is entirely different in actuality than what your narration pretends it to be.
So the stuff that I'm narrating, and I have really solid confidence in it,
Sure.
you're suggesting didn't happen the way I recall or experienced it to happen.
Right. Well, in one sense it did, but in another sense so much more was happening in so many incredibly inconceivable other ways that are not included in the narration as to render the narration hopelessly partial and inadequate.
Okay, so granted, my memory is limited and getting worse. That interspersed with all of these cardinal points of the narrative, a ton of weird shit was going on in terms of sentiment and mind and made-up things, right? Illusory drama fields that I don't have any recall of whatsoever because they're so vague and so weird.
But not just that, not just in terms of the qualities that you again just enumerated,
Uh-huh.
but the very qualities that you did enumerate are not what the definition of the terms you used to enumerate them might pretend. Like you said, you found your pants.
Oh yeah.
So finding is not actually finding.
What
and
happened?
pants are not actually pants.
Whoa.
You know, going to the finding your keys again. Finding is not actually finding. Keys are not actually keys.
What was it then?
Well, it can't be said what it is. That's the point. And yet that narrative is absolutely fine as far as it goes.
Yeah.
It just doesn't go very far. You can say all of that and say that that's true. Yes, it's true. You went to the grocery store and you got groceries. Cool.
Sure, right.
But in actuality, nothing like that happened. What actually happened is unspeakably bizarre and entirely unsayable in words and with accuracy. So that narration is fine. It's just really radically, extremely inadequate, inaccurate.
Okay, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. All right. I mean, I can appreciate, the inadequacy and for sure the inaccuracy, right? But I'm not going to volunteer to let go of the confidence or the fact that something happened, and that I can.
Well, that's fine.
Trace, a litany of events where there were consequences, needs, impulses, choices, decisions, and successful, military operation to get groceries.
Sure. Yeah. Take no prisoners.
Yeah. Right. And so I'm okay with that reality. What?
It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it.
All right. Good.
I'm not asking you to give it up.
Okay, then.
But if you choose to,
were I to choose to,
you can see what it really is, and not only will you get to retain your confidence in the process, but you'll get infinitely more confidence and joy and astounding participation in this inconceivable functionality that far exceeds the miracle of being able to get your pants on and find your keys and get to the grocery store.
Well, so, that sounds great. That sounds like, the kind of snake oil that I could purchase.
Yeah. Operator understanding guy.
Yeah. Whether I want to purchase that snake oil, that's another factor.
Absolutely.
Because, unless I'm suffering, and that comes and goes, the story of going to the market, getting food, bringing it home is like, hey, that's good. I'm sufficient.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're happy there,
right.
I'm not trying to rock any boats.
No, of course. Yeah, no, you'll let me go to the market. I get that. Yeah. All right. So then, what might be the nature of the? I've got to be really fucking dissatisfied with something to want to take on the snake oil that you're offering.
Not necessarily dissatisfied. You may be curious. You may be have a questing spirit, a spirit of adventure, a spirit of inquiry, a spirit of science, of let's get to the bottom of this. Let's find out what reality is. Yeah, exactly. And that is those are framed or couched in relatively positive terms as opposed to dissatisfaction, which is couched in a relatively negative context.
Yeah. Right.
But one reason or another, however you would qualify it or quantify it, you have to have something that makes you even ask that question or even listen to this line of drivel.
For sure.
And then but that motivating factor, that itch or quest or drive or whatever it is, such as it is the answer to the question of why not just settle for going to the damn grocery store?
Why not? I can feel the difference.
Oh, you could have gone to the liquor store and you went to the grocery store,
I didn't want to tell that story. There's some people in recovery here. I can feel the difference between wanting to ameliorate, let's say, suffering, which has a certain kind of bright atmosphere, as contrasted with, sacred affection.
Sure.
Right. That rocks.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be, it can be a whole melange of questing spirit and hate for, the normalcy of one's background.
Sure.
It can be just a whole astounding.
It does tend to be.
No doubt.
How could anyone insist this is the reason I, seek or I'm interested in?
Of course. And even seeing that or saying that means you're well in the throes of
Yeah.
of just what I'm talking about.
Well, that's right. Yeah, there's sharp teeth all around my neck. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, even emphasizing the motive is only will take us so far.
Sure.
Right.
But any and all that motive and such on so on is just more narrative. Ultimately it's just an imputation, and what is it really?
Okay.
And then as soon as you ask that question, you're in the thick of the yoga, if you really ask it.
Okay. All right. What does really asking it mean then? What's the nature of? Well, no, I know what the nature of narrative is. That's the me that I hate, the mind that I hate, right? The predictability of my experience that I could do without. That I see. That's the narrative. Okay. So. But that's all I've ever known. Let's say that's all I've had.
Is it really?
Well, you get a spiritual experience here and there. What the hell? A carrot shows up. It does.
Yeah.
So then, well, is there a how-to out of the habit, which seems so well established, of experiencing life through narrative?
Sure, very easy. Just notice the ways in which you are already transcending that.
Like now?
Perhaps now. I don't know. Do you have to notice this for yourself? No one outside can tell you.
All right. So okay.
Suppose you find yourself transported by beautiful music or ugly music.
That's happened. Yes.
Suppose you find yourself transported by beautiful art, or weird art. Suppose you find yourself looking at the beauties of nature and just going, oh,
that's happened.
Fuck me.
Yeah.
It's like, so in any of these things, in what way can those be included in a narrative except in the most superficial way of, oh, I saw a cool sunset yesterday?
Yeah, I can't recount those with any degree
So right away you have explicit, quality and quantity of experience.
Yeah.
That obviously and immediately transcends your frame of reference. So just check those things out.
So see
what's there. What's there.
So here's the craving. I can relate to each one of those examples, and of course more.
Mm-hmm.
But those tend to be isolated events. Are we speaking about a quality of consciousness, exploration, divinity, what have you, that's present now, that's unabated now?
Absolutely. Those events are just explicit revelations of what is always the case, and they are obvious. They're so obvious that they will penetrate the thickest of identifications with a narrative.
They are penetrated,
and yet, by tuning into these kinds of events, one sensitizes oneself. One increases one's sensitivity to the actuality, the transcendental quality of these events that explicitly transcends the frame of reference, and as one increases one's sensitivity to perceive that, one will notice more and more the way in which, other experience and ultimately all experience partakes of exactly the same quality.
So if I'm rocking a Killer Sunset or a Pink Floyd cover band, right, or art at the Momo, that I can see. Whoa,
sure,
that's like a gift, right?
Sure.
But, okay, so how do I enroll in this if, let's say tomorrow, I want to go back to Andronikos?
Sure. The trick is to see next time you're in one of these explicit experiences, like the museum or the sunset or what have you,
yes,
try to tune into what is it about this that is so amazing. And don't try and define it. Don't try to come up with more narrative, but just feel it.
I love that question. What is it?
Let yourself feel. What is here that is, where's the magic?
Yeah.
And again, don't try to collapse the magic to a narrative. Don't try to pull it into your frame of reference.
Right.
Just let yourself go to it. Feel it.
The reason I might use the word magic or enjoy that you use it is because I don't know what it is, because it's fucking magic.
That's the point.
Okay.
Reality is you cannot know what it is conceptually or definitively within the same quality of knowing which we know what we know, which from within a frame of reference.
So then this texture of availability, of catharsis, of mind stop, of magic, you're suggesting that this indeed is the non-stop nature condition of reality.
Exactly so. Reality is entirely completely magic. I mean, I enjoy the word transcendental because it sounds so much more studious and.
That's a $12 word. Right?
But you can just go with the fucking magic and that kind of.
Depending on the mood, right? Yeah.
It's fucking magic, man. It's fucking magic.
Okay. I mean, but in the yogas, I mean, there's a warning, about cities, about about elaborate experience, right?
All that.
Sadhu sabdan, right? Yogi beware.
That's right.
So, I mean, should I watch out for where you're going here, or what?
No, because while all that's true, the most insidious and harmful city is the one which has created these frames of reference that you're already completely lost in.
You mean that I believe that crap?
Yeah.
So I shouldn't be worried about you, even though, my Hindu guru said, be careful out there.
No. All of that is too much information and irrelevant.
Okay.
The point is, discover what reality is, and then you will be able to answer all these questions for yourself. And the method to discover it is very simple, as we've been toying with it in this discussion for the last few minutes. And so all these notions of cities and all that's just more conceptual frame of reference, basically. Find out for yourself what that actually refers to, and the only way to find that out is to go directly to reality outside of a frame of reference, which we're already toying with.
Yeah.
And then, in the context of reality itself, you can discover directly what cities are and discover directly if and how they could be dangerous and so on and so forth.
So let's say there's a present moment here or a stream of them. I'm not really good at characterizing this. How am I feeling this? What's the nature of my experience right now if I don't tell myself what it is?
Great question.
Yeah.
Look and see. Look and see. You can look and see because it's right here. It's, as you say, it's available. It is present. It is actual.
It's fuzzy.
Yeah. That's interesting. What exactly does fuzzy mean?
I don't know.
Let's check it out. You can't say, just feel it. Feel the fuzz.
Yeah. Feeling the fuzz. Fake the funk and feel the fuzz.
Yeah, it's not, but it's fuzzy, but it's not just fuzzy.
No.
It's also actual. It's also present.
Well, I have a lot of confidence that this is.
Yeah, maybe, but you don't even need to have confidence.
No, this is.
Sure.
It's not relying on my confidence, nor am I.
Sure. So again, just check it out. Be with it without succumbing or without obsessing too much on the urge to answer questions and to pull it back into a frame of reference that you can narrate. Just feel
this?
Yeah, trip on it. Let go into it. It's like, feel it like you settle back in a hot tub and sigh. Close your eyes and drift off.
Yeah. Okay. And, let's say a cascade of, explanation, justification, old poor meism or old wonderful meism shows up.
Sure.
How do I navigate, noise?
Don't worry about it. Stay with the magic to the extent you can.
Yeah.
And let the magic worry about how to navigate the noise. And the magic will show you very quickly that the noise is not opposite to it. The noise is not antagonistic to the magic. So to any degree, if you're with the magic, the noise will cease to be an issue.
So the fuzzy magic will handle the noise. Yeah. I don't have to be an interventionist.
Exactly.
Whoa. Okay. I rest.
The radiance looks after its own.
Thank you.
Court rest.
Back in there somewhere, there was the question, how do you know if you're really asking? I can't remember exactly what it was saying, but it was like that. How do you know if you're... You said, if you ask that question, if you really ask that question, how do you know if you're really asking?
Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Because again, that is a question which pretends to have an answer. It could be answered one way or another, and that's not magic. Go to the magic.
Okay.
And in the nature of, what in this discussion we're calling the magic, all these questions and answers are seen to be, a cool game. A cool game at best, i.e. totally irrelevant with nothing hinging on them.
So the feeling is indicative of what? You said stay with the feeling.
Sure. Because reality is felt. You could say reality is a feeling. Reality is felt the way a punch in the face is felt. Or perhaps more pleasantly the way a loving kiss is felt. It's an actual experiential qualitative presence. That's the very nature of actuality. It's always actual, and it always presents with infinite range of characteristics.
So are you saying that's what's real?
We call that radiant presence. The fact that it's always actual is, I refer to as by this term presence, and the fact that it always presents felt experiential characteristics, I refer to as radiance.
Before my birth, was it like this?
I don't know. Before your birth is a concept. Look and see what it's like now and discover if the whole notion of time is even relevant, or history.
Is there this by virtue of my having been born?
No. You're the other way around. You seem to have been born because there is this. This is the only actuality, and any and everything that we impute as an event is just an interpretation of this actuality.
Looking back through memory, I can feel my life. I can feel my life.
Sure, absolutely.
Before a certain age, where there's no, active memory of events or circumstances occurring.
Right.
That's void space. I don't have any
idea. You're thinking of it or experiencing it as void space. That doesn't mean it is void space.
No, I can't really say
you
one way or the other.
Yeah, exactly. You may think deep sleep is void space too, but it may not actually be. It may be too subtle or in other ways ungraspable in terms of memory. And more to the point, memory may not be actually grasping anything. What memory is magic and mystery itself. And so the simplistic notion that memory is an accurate recounting of an actual history is entirely suspect.
That could be total bullshit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, something's appearing in the present fuzziness of this magic we're talking about.
That you may call memory.
For convenience sake, I know how to refer to that as memory.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
And even if that it is something and it appearing is questionable. I mean, the whole thing, every aspect of it, if you look closely, begins to get very, very weird.
Well, I'm trained, language, math,
sure, all that.
Political, social correctness, which I'm poor at. Right?
Welcome to the club.
Yeah, I like this girl. I'm trained, should I say analog or digitally, right? So that there is a cornucopia of findable shit.
Well, there seems to be, it presents itself as if it was that, but again, you can't say what's actually happening or what it actually is in those terms.
When you ask me to feel what this is like right about now, I can't spin that out.
Yeah,
I can't really say what it is.
That's the point. You can't say what it is, and yet it is what it is, and this what it is inherently presenting as all of the narrative that you previously presented as your narrated version of it, constituting or including this, that, and the other, with memory and history and functionality and all that. All of that narrative refers to this actuality that you can't say what it is. And yet, that's actuality you can't say what it is seemingly or apparently doing all that to the extent all that is being done.
Yeah, it's like well, yeah. I mean, anything that's spoken or felt or shared, in a good way or otherwise, is referring back to what? But right? That this is?
Yeah. Nothing else. There's nothing else to refer to.
Yeah, what else could
And it's not even referring back to it. It actually consists of this. But it exists. This presents as if it was that, partially.
Oh.
In other words, when memory shows up, it is this presenting as if it's memory right here, right now.
Yeah. So is this...
So on and so forth.
So does this have countless symptoms or none?
You can't say. It's magic. It can look either way.
If
you want to see it that way.
Uh-huh. Whoa.
As I recall, there was some Greek mythological figure where it appeared to be what one expected it to be or something, and in reality, that's a myth for one aspect of this reality, is that it itself is the very essence of weirdness, and yet it can very convincingly seem to be this, that, or virtually anything.
So it can self-fulfill as particular experience.
Perhaps.
Or objects found.
Yeah, perhaps. It seems to be.
It does seem to be. Yeah.
Well, I'm still caught up in the hot tub. I'm still not.
Don't get caught up. Just sit back and sigh.
Exactly, but because that's the experience, and yet there's just an infinite amount of all this.
Yeah.
But I seem to get caught. Caught up. I seem to create a certain definition of that experience of what that radiant presence is, being the hot tub.
Sure.
Sure.
But that's just another definition. That's not the thing itself. That's just more narrative, which is not an issue or a problem, because narrative is this and doesn't depart from this. Narrative doesn't need to cease or even stop being believed in. You just need to see what it is, which is this, which is more present characteristics, more seeming. Nothing is antagonistic to this, to reality. Nothing is the opposite of this. Nothing is a problem to this. Nothing negates this or cancels it out or makes it lesser or damages it in any way whatsoever. Everything whatsoever is simply the evidence of this, a symptom of this. I mean, our most heinous delusion and suffering and confusion and identification and being lost in psychotic worldviews is the very evidence of this astounding transcendental fact. This is what's doing all that. This is what's presenting us all that.
Yeah, I don't understand when people here start talking about thought as a problem or suffering.
Sure.
I mean, I know what suffering is. That's suffering. I mean,
well,
but I don't understand that compared to this. I mean,
well, it's not.
I've noticed.
But you're coming less from a traditional sort of a New Agey spiritual framework. Within that sort of milieu of sort of Buddhism / Hinduism all smushed together and misunderstood, which is sort of the mindset of a lot of modern American misspent youth. The big demons are the conscious mind, thought, and suffering. And those are the problems. What's the solution? That's what I'm saying. That's why you don't understand.
But I mean, on the other hand, I come from a a Christian, you know.
So you probably have your own. You probably have your own stuff that.
No, but ever since, you know, I started, you know, for all seeking or for noticing, it's all very ephemeral,
Sure.
and it's fun.
Well, it is because that's how it is.
And
you don't. The important thing, the thing, isn't to try and make sense of other people's insanity. The thing is to see what is true,
yeah.
which obviates all insanity as irrelevant, including one's own.
I like when you and Jeff are talking when you're talking about fuzz. I mean, I wouldn't call it. You know,
no,
but
one way to put it.
you know, I have.
I can go there.
And it happens, and the things happen more and more, but it happens. It happens just like that. I'm out of context.
Sure.
And you know, things are getting sort of fuzzy.
Sure.
You know, so that's cool. I mean, I even notice it sometimes.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah.
And
that's the yoga.
then, you know, I go back to whatever I was doing, and
Sure.
then it happens again.
Sure. It's called life. It's called life.
Yeah. I mean, I think it seems more normal the way you talk about it than I think most people would think about it.
Yeah, but I mean, all of this is entirely normal and entirely within everyone's experience. It's simply a matter of recognizing it as it is, rather than misdefining it or misinterpreting it.
Yeah, and actually, it's sort of disturbing to try to quantify it or qualify it.
Well, it's absurd, and it's manifestly and obviously absurd. The more one becomes attuned to the nature of this actuality. The very nature of what it is so completely and utterly beyond those kinds of
I mean, it's sort of like, you know, when you learn about a magic trick, how it's really done. You know, it's no longer magic.
Sure, yeah.
Am I responsible for the apparency of differentiation?
In a sense you are, but when you say I, what you're really referring to is this astounding actuality, which is doing all of that, as well as not being limited by all of that, and as well as being beyond all that, all concurrently.
So if a frame of reference of individuation arises, through which there's the filtration of I, me, my, right?
Right.
Lowercase self.
Sure.
This is doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. This is doing everything, and everything that it's doing is its process of, you can't say what, which is the total process, which can also be defined as your karma or your path of unfoldment.
So then it's possible, plausible, if not at hand, that the myth of identification and particularization can be absolutely seen through.
Oh, absolutely, certainly, without being denied or invalidated. It's just another mode of reality that reality is not actually limited to, and that of course is not actually what it seems to be. But of course, nothing is actually what it seems to be, if it seems to be anything in particular.
But seeing through it is not understanding it.
Well, not in human terms, but it is truly understanding it, i.e., understanding what it actually is, which completely transcends anything that anyone may have ever thought it was or said it was.
That was the point I was trying to make. Maybe I used a metaphor that was less than optimal.
Well, anyway.
Yeah.
I guess we got there.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, is there a better metaphor to use for, I don't know, what we call this enlightenment, liberation, awakening, Kensho, right? Blah,
sure.
blah, blah.
Well, there's no metaphor. I mean, I think the notion magic is the ultimate sort of paradigm. That magic is a notion that is addressable from within a human framework, and it also inherently transcends that framework. So that's a really nice little bridging model.
Magic is felt, magic is seen, magic is operating.
Sure,
right?
Magic can be said to be happening, and yet when it's happening, you can't say what it is because it's magic. And you can say it's magic, so you can say what it is.
Okay.
So it's very, this notion of magic is a nice, it sort of exists on both sides of the looking glass.
Yeah.
The eye has to be seen through.
Doesn't have to be, but it can be.
Well, if someone is interested in the truth,
Yeah.
they have to see the eye.
Yeah, but more simply than that, just see what is, and then when you see what is, the seeing through the eye comes with gratis.
Or seeing through
You don't need to see through this, see through that, and see through the other. You just have to see what reality is, and that simple seeing accomplishes all the other seeing throughs.
Okay, but you say just see what it is.
Yeah.
Just see what it is.
Yeah. By seeing what it is.
By feeling it.
Yes, by feeling it.
And by
No, and.
just feeling it.
Just feeling it.
Feeling it.
Feel it. Get into it. Let yourself.
That gets you out of your head and out of thoughts and
Yeah,
out of...
but not out of as in terms of as an either or negating them. It shifts the center of gravity as being oriented towards a thought matrix towards an open-ended matrix of actuality, and without needing to eliminate or remove the thoughts.
Transcend.
Well,
Transcends, yeah.
Ram Dass says I have to get out of my head and into my heart. Should I buy another one of those books?
Many as you want.
Okay.
He and his publishers would be overjoyed.
All right. Yeah.
That's why he makes them. If you don't buy them, why should he bother to make them?
Seriously, someone's going to buy the dribble.
Peter,
Yeah.
it seems like what I notice is it's kind of progressive. I mean, it's not like you're like, okay, I see through everything right now. It's sort of like you start noticing, and then your consciousness just learns how to notice more and more.
Yeah.
And pretty soon it's almost parallel with what else is going on.
Yeah.
You can see it and you can see what else is going on. It's a parallel thing that's happening. And so it's not some big dramatic, I see through this, but it's just becoming more and more sensitive to the magic.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's a natural, it goes on anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the magic is always happening. It's not like it was, you discovered it. It's always going on.
Yeah.
You just sort of like, you tune into it like you're tuning into the radio.
Yeah, a really good way to understand this yoga is as sensitization therapy.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're
Descent or sense?
Sensitive.
Positively.
You're training yourself or allow yourself to develop an ever increasing sensitivity to that which you cannot describe.
Yeah.
To that which is actual. That which is actual, if you take the trouble to look, you will discover you cannot describe.
And it's always going on.
Yeah, and it's infinite. There's no limit to how deeply you can be sensitive to it, to how deeply you can be with it as it is. And it's endlessly weird because the more sensitive you become to it, it morphs, it changes, it reveals ever new aspects of it that you couldn't have imagined that you could ever have seen this degree of subtlety that completely renders everything else you've ever seen absurd, and then that progresses forever, deepening.
I was looking at something that I went to bed really early last night because I'm working now in the daytime. I think I went to bed at 6 or 7 o'clock, so I was up at 3 or 4. And I just noticed just as I came out of deep sleep, I could just see this energy come up really clearly. And I just looked at it for a long time, like I didn't feel like I had to modify it or do anything about it because whatever was coming up is complete and whole in itself, no matter what it looks like.
Yeah.
It's just it's like better than I could ever modify it or pick it up.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever's coming up is this. Well, it's coming up from the totality, so it's like totally pure kind of thing.
Yes.
And it's amazing to see that.
Everything that presents is the presentation of the absolute transcendental reality.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
And so even stuff that we once would have grappled with as the enemy in our prison and our limitation turns out in actuality to be a sacrament of this astounding fullness, this astounding infinity.
Yeah, exactly. And I sort of after I saw that for a while and I hung out there watching that for a while, then I thought, well, boy, any experience is totally 100%
Any experience is reality.
is fantastic.
Yes,
It's not
any
only just
experience.
reality; it's fantastic
Yeah.
because it's totally complete and done right there.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like the perfect.
yeah,
Whatever happens is the perfect thing.
yeah, yeah,
Really
absolutely.
You mean like now?
Pretty much like now, yep. And now too.
Again?
Still.
Still.
Well, again, still. More magic. Is it again or is it still? Is it both? Is it neither?
Really?
Both and,
Does
either
this,
or,
does
neither
this
nor?
take a coffee break or what?
Doesn't need to.
Can't say.
It is a coffee break.
Well, it's about to be a dessert break in about 2 minutes.
I noticed that if I am looking for obstacles and hindrance, that's what I expect.
Sure.
I don't actually find any, but that's what I expect.
Well, you're a skillful yogi if you're not finding any.
That's right. No, it's true. I mean, it's the same. It's the same process. It seems like to me. You
Sure.
whatever you're looking for,
Yeah.
is going to end up in the same.
Yeah.
Same. Well, not finding.
Yeah, yeah. When you discover the actual condition that everything is infinitely indeterminate, that's the real magical principle. When you discover that as a concrete fact of the nature of experience, the nature of reality, that's when you're home free, you're Teflon. Because anything and everything is exactly conforms to that, i.e. it's nothing in particular, while seeming to be whatever it seems to be until you look and you know, yes, sure enough, can't find it. It's right here, but I can't find it.
Yeah, it's so indeterminate. I mean,
Yeah,
but by the time I quote unquote notice,
yeah.
it's done because.
Yeah, you can't even say what you
I
noticed.
can't
It's like,
even-
what was that?
No,
It's just infinite weirdness.
I know it's.
Quarter milk.
I mean,
It's
magic
sort of very
is the
frustrating
perfect
because
metaphor.
Then my mind starts setting in. Oh, I want that. I want more of that.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
but I don't know what it was. So there's no way. It's sort of like Alice in Wonderland. There's no
Yeah.
way to go.
It's just like Alice in Wonderland. Alice in Wonderland is a wonderful spiritual sutra.
Yeah.
Trying to make something of it or make it special.
Yeah.
Drop actually pulls you back out to the thought. To the
Well, it endlessly
narrating, even though it's not narrating, it's
Yeah.
also narrating.
it endlessly presents as
You're just gonna be
something, and it never actually becomes something.
No.
And yet it endlessly presents as infinite implications of some things.
I'm not even consider. I mean, it happens so many times
Seemings.
now.
I
it's
like the
not
word
special.
seemings.
I don't consider it like before.
Yeah.
You know, the
Yeah.
special thing. Hang on to it, but
Yeah.
there's still a little sense of frustration.
Sure. But yeah, but this is all very typical, you know. I would say for most people, perhaps for all people, it has a typically a pretty serious learning curve. Of sort of learning to. It is so intrinsically bizarre that learning to be with it as it is like, wait, no, this is just I can't. This is too much.
Yeah.
Perfectly weird.
It's perfectly weird. It's worse than that. It's imperfectly weird.
It's also fucking fantastic.
Oh, it's totally fantastic. I mean, that's the upside of the coin of this yoga is that it seduces you. Once you actually see this, you go, oh wow, man, yes, because it's just so cool.
Well, you can totally trust it because you just can.
It's real.
Yeah.
It's real. It's real, and it's endlessly cool. What more could you ask? It's like, wow, winning the lottery.
Is there Kool-Aid on the dessert table?
Speaking of which,
We got Kool-Aid!
don't drink the Kool-Aid, but it is dessert time. So we'll take about a 10-minute break, online people, and we'll see you
Turn the
presently.
computer around
Yes,
and
it's chocolate.
notice that.
When you talk about feeling, as you were referring to it as feeling the reality or the truth.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to think that there must be an organ somewhere of feeling. And it's analogous to emotions. Maybe you know there's
Right.
different emotional sensations or functionality occurs when you feel this emotion or that emotion.
Well, but
Is this feeling different, genetically different?
I use the word feeling to point out that to invite noticing that experience is experienced with incredible intimacy as a profound textual presence. And, so the word that is, the sort of commonplace word that's most analogous to that to me, a word that is analogous to that is feeling. So you notice that, you say perceiving or experiencing or something, those words are kind of abstract and dry. Whereas if you look at what experience actually consists of, experience is very intimately felt as a textual presence. For example, the field of vision is intimate, absolutely immediately present as with an astoundingly subtle texture and so on. And again, all talking in terms of sense fields, of course, you find the same thing. Thought is the same thing as this astounding textural presence. And this texture is very intimately known. And so, like we were speaking during the break about, this word, jnana or knowing. And, feeling is exactly analogous to that, knowing. But I was, I like the word feeling because it immediately and intuitively suggests the way that the intimacy with which the detail, the textual detail of experience is known with absolute profundity and immediacy. And simply noticing that fact is very good noticing, and feeling this textual presence as it presents itself is the yoga. And because the very nature of this texture is infinite. And of course, since it is that, it will convey that it is that, and then you're off and running. I mean, very simply, we went into a rather elaborate discussion earlier about, going to museums and looking at sunsets and such. But in actual fact, if you just take any experience whatsoever, just, the most superficial experience, and just feel what it feels like, without trying to put it into words, just feel what it feels like, and bang, you're lost, you're gone. Because what any experience feels like is endlessly astounding, and which is the whole point, which is both the beginning and the end of yoga. It's the beginning and the path and the goal of yoga. Just this feeling. And it doesn't matter where you start. Any experience whatsoever, just feel what it feels like, and you're gone.
You said lost and gone. I think it's found.
Okay, found, yeah.
On, off.
If you lose yourself, do you find yourself? If you find yourself, do you lose?
Yes.
One pill makes you larger and the other makes you smaller.
Like infinity has its own nature that shines through.
Yeah, exactly. Experience is intrinsically infinite.
But that infinity, it's almost like it has a smell or a quality.
Oh, it's explicit. It's specific. It's not a vague thing. It's precisely that. And since it is so explicit, it reveals itself. It conveys itself. It shows itself to intimate examination, to intelligent engagement.
But that examination doesn't conclude. It doesn't.
No, there's no end to it.
It's like the other day I was looking and it was like all this stuff was just there. And then I sort of noticed this sense of, well, what is this? And I could see it was like there was like a drawing being made out of infinity.
Right.
You know, like
Sure.
roiling infinity. A drawing
Yeah.
that seemed like something.
Sure.
Didn't get very far, but it
Yeah.
seemed like something.
Sure.
But it was just a selection from it all.
Yeah.
You know, it's just that.
Yeah.
But what was there, you could say before and after, or just like in any case, was this tangibility, this dust.
Yeah. Infinity presents with endless seemings without ceasing to be explicitly infinity. And the very nature of being with it is this very strange sort of a bivalence. It's kind of like the physicist, is it a particle or is it a wave? So it is always absolutely and obviously infinity, and yet it also endlessly presents as an infinite, spectrum of seeming partialities of this and that, and maybe it's this and maybe it's that, and all these seemings are themselves infinite and absolutely unstable and absolutely dynamic and morphing in the whole thing. So again, infinity is still revealed even in the seemings. So again, it doesn't matter where you go with it, what your point of contact with it is, you find the same thing because it's always exactly the same. It's always itself. It always reveals its nature in any of its presentations. I mean, that's what's so astounding about this, is it's inconceivable protean nature. It can look like, like I say, it can look like anything, but it's always itself. It can look like deep sleep. It can look like unconsciousness. It can look like, a busy day with incredible involvement in all sorts of details. It can look like sitting and tripping on hallucinations. I mean, it can look like anything, or more likely all of the above simultaneously. And yet you can never pin it down, and it is always exactly and explicitly and obviously itself. So it's not when it presents itself as seemingly this or that, it never actually becomes this or that. It never stops being itself in its absolute infinity and transcendence, even as it unstoppingly and unceasingly presents as this endless, this endless tidal wave of seemings.
Peter, this is sort of a practical question, but is that, I've tried this, not much success, but is there a way you can sort of, prolong, the moment when you're sort of just resting, in this, or, like, for instance, obviously, like when you do that, guided meditation, that's sort of, or any kind of meditation, I guess, you can sort of go in and out, but it's not quite the same as when you're...
Right, but prolonging is a fantasy, because the very nature of what this is infinitely unstable and dynamic.
Right.
So, whatever you find, it's going to be something else in the next instant.
Right.
And even in the same instant, it's going to be something else, because
Yeah.
it never resolves into stability of being this or that, even in the instant.
Yeah.
And so that constant instability, that constant never settling into itself, is being settled in it.
Yeah.
And so, basically, that's why I like to model of it as sensitivity training. You're really training in sensitivity to absolute instability. And you get that it is absolute instability, so absolute instability is its stable state.
Yeah.
The stable state of reality is absolute instability, absolute unresolvability, absolute dynamism.
Yeah.
And that is its stable state, which is a weird thing to get, because it's asked backwards. It's completely...
It's better, that's a better way of describing it than even infinity. When I think of infinity, I think of,
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of ways to put it. Technically, mathematically, it is precisely an infinity. But of course, if you're not technically, schooled in that kind of thing, that's not
Right.
very helpful. But yeah, there's
Yeah.
a lot of ways to put it, all of which are different ways of saying the same thing.
But yeah,
It's
I
absolutely,
don't really know what I mean when I'm seeking, or that I want it to,
you want to notice that the trick of, I think what you're talking about really is noticing that it never departs from itself.
Oh.
Because that's kind of when you're always with it, whatever's happening.
Yeah.
You're never not with it. And the trick is to develop a sufficient subtlety in your sense of what it is, and then you get that you are with it all the time.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like learning its scent really well, and its scent's right here. Yes,
Yeah,
scent's
one of the
its
first-
scent is always right here. Whatever it's looking like, it can look like, absolutely.
Yeah, like one of the very earliest senses I had of that was that it's always been there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Absolutely.
it's a little bit more, it was recognizable.
Yeah.
I mean, I had to be, else how would I have been able to experience it?
Yeah.
But the
the
sense of it always being there.
It has something, and you can't pin it down and say what it is, of course, because it is absolutely indeterminate. But it has a nature that is knowable, that is palpable, that is obvious, and that never goes and never comes, even as it is continually coming and going, in its presentation, as its nature, which never comes and goes. So, again, you can't, talking about it, you just start lapsing into all this paradoxical gibberish. But nonetheless, intelligently, with the inherent intelligence, you can know this, you can perceive it very clearly. You can find it, you can definitively find it, even though it never presents a stable version of itself. And yet you can still find it. And when you find that, then there's no coming and going, even as it is continually coming and going with absolute insane dynamism in its presentations. Mm-hmm. But when we kind of have a partial identification of it, it can seem to sort of come and go. Where, I've got it. Yes, I'm settled in it. Yes, and then it's like, wait a minute, where'd it go? I lost it. I'm up in my whatever.
Yeah.
But that's not ever true. You never actually lose it. But you may not recognize that you never lose it, depending on how mature or how sophisticated your understanding, or you sort of call it your felt sense, your intuitive sense of what it is.
Right.
And so that's what is really being developed, is the sort of the clarity or the intimacy with which you know it. And as that builds up, then just you get more and more and more absolute self-verifying certainty that it never departs from itself.
But you have the sense always that it's going on. I mean, like,
Yeah.
I was thinking, like, you could think about it as, like, say, a bubble machine. There's this brewing, but the bubbles maybe are over there, and I
Sure.
can notice it, but all of a sudden there they are.
Yeah. Sure.
But the bubbles have always been, erupting.
Yeah.
So it's no longer, it's not so much of a surprise or anything.
Yeah.
I was thinking that it feels like that it's so well known to you that you don't notice it. It's like the taste of your mouth.
Yeah. It's just, yeah, absolutely.
So well known, but then when you sort of start to get it, then you go, oh yeah, I see it all the time. I always have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why so many of the ways of referring to it are like the Atman, the self, because it is that. It is so profoundly intimate, so profoundly oneself.
Yeah.
And yet beyond ego identification or personality or anything, but the true self. It truly is. It's meaningful to say that it truly is that.
Right. Yeah.
Actually, I understand with how you said it makes like the taste of your now for yourself in that sense. But I don't get the self thing.
Well, don't worry about it. You're a Buddhist. Yeah. I mean, because again, selfness is not final because it is itself.
Yeah.
And what it is not like anything other than itself. It's unlike anything but what it is, and it is absolutely transcendental. So yeah, this is.
Yeah.
And so saying it's like a self or something like that, even though it may be meaningful in very profound ways, is not finally definitive.
Right.
But of course, nothing is finally definitive. So there you go. Nothing new there.
It's interesting that there is something that's unambiguously true,
Yes.
and yet nothing that you can say is unambiguously true.
Yeah, it's
And
fascinating.
nothing that you can think, nothing that you can... There's nothing that's unambiguously true except that...
Except the truth itself.
Except that there is
Reality itself. Absolutely. No, yeah, this is very specifically, very precisely exactly what it is. And this inconceivable precision, inconceivable specificity is directly and obviously knowable.
Mm-hmm.
And self-verifyingly the case. And yet, having said that, you can't say fuck all else about it.
And even that's not...
Yeah, well, no, that's sure, that's not final. Yeah. Endless weirdness, magic.
I said it was fucking fantastic. It's just
That's a pretty good. Screw the out, man. We got fucking fantastic. How about self-realization? I want fucking fantastic realization.
Ram Dass has written a book about fucking fantastic.
No, I mean this is one of the really strangest things about this is that it is so precisely knowable, and this is knowable. Realization is an actuality. It's not just possible. It's a very specific thing. It's very precise. There's nothing vague about it. And yet, having said that.
Well, we've been trained, I have been trained, and I think probably most of us have been trained with the idea that if something is knowable, it is describable.
Mm-hmm.
And so you really got to break that conditioning.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the only thing you have to do is break that conditioning.
Yeah, within human logic, the idea of knowing means being able to abstract it.
Yes.
And the true knowing is not like that at all. The true knowing is absolute intimate engagement.
Absolutely.
It's an engagement of identity, really. It's an engagement of being it.
It's more of an artistic expression. We also, everybody has a sense of intuition.
Sure.
I don't know. I suppose people can try and describe that intuition.
Oh yeah, sure.
But people have a sense, and then they'll write a poem or they'll paint something.
Oh, all that.
Yeah.
In communication.
Trying to express something that's inexpressible.
It may be inexpressible, but all failures to express it completely express it as well.
Yeah.
Because the very nature of expression is an embodiment of reality, which is pure intelligence, pure meaningfulness.
Right.
So all these failures to express it very profoundly and very usefully.
Yeah.
Paradoxically, even as they fail.
Yeah.
I mean, like all these conversations we have completely miss the point, and yet they completely nail the point.
Right.
So, go figure. Try and make sense of that. Magic. It's gibberish, but it's true.
Mumbo jumbo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Piece it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is very familiar. I came up really in my paradigm was magic, and the nice thing about magic is it's very comfortable with paradox. It's very comfortable with things being many things at once, contradictorily, and yet truly, and effectively so. In this, in modern times, we're kind of, most of us, I imagine, or at least in the popular sort of, consensus reality, most of us are distanced from magic as being anything actual or useful or real, other than sort of a silly fantasy to base, sci-fi movies on or something.
There was a kid in Louisiana or somewhere in the South last week who just got expelled from school for casting a magic spell on their teacher.
Seriously?
Yeah, somewhere in the South.
Oh yeah.
Maybe the point of the spell was to get himself expelled.
Now they're really screwed.
It was a 12-year-old girl. She
Precocious.
apparently put a hex on one of her teachers.
Nice. Well, if anyone knows her, please give her this URL and she can tune in and come into the coven.
This week's password, pork medallions.
Or any other facsimile thereof.
Well, that means then that all the school officials and the teacher believed in magic too. Yeah.
At least she's ever in charge of firing.
Right.
But again, it's so much simpler. It's not about trying to model it or trying to find a paradigm. It just, here it is. You're already completely dancing with it, just like, notice that fact. It couldn't be much simpler. And all this other stuff is just, fun entertainment.
Hollywood. The other thing that's interesting is that given how much we are under illusion or delusion, is the inherent intelligence is fantastically intelligent and muscular to get us out of that.
Absolutely.
I mean, and it does it on its own most of the. I mean, we can sit and meditate or try, but
Sure.
It's really just doing it on its own.
Yeah. Inherent intelligence is doing all this for its own benefit, i.e. for your benefit.
Yeah.
And when you discover that fact and begin to identify with the inherent intelligence, then that's when the fireworks start, because then you get that, oh wow, I am this, I'm doing all this,
Yeah.
and it's all for my benefit, and that's when the benefits really start to kick in more explicitly.
Yeah.
You get to enjoy the participating in the process so much more immediately and powerfully and comprehensively, rather than identifying with a sort of a detached, partial intelligence over here that's looking at everything, trying to figure out what the fuck's going on. The inherent intelligence is bang! It's just like
Yeah.
machine language. It's totally engaged with every single flash of manifestation and doing it and juggling it and dance and choreographing the dance.
Yeah.
And of course you are actually that, but it's but the inherent intelligence has a very a different flavor than the personality based intelligence. And so when you discover that flavor and you discover, wow, wait a minute, what's going on here? There's a demon in the basement here,
Right.
All of a sudden, that's, it's a big wow factor, just that discovery.
Yeah, it takes a while, I think, to have it sort of integrated in.
Yeah, totally.
Because
Totally.
there is a way that you can say, oh, it's something foreign, a demon is over
Yeah.
here.
Well, from the personality-based perspective, it's all very weird and foreign and other.
Yeah.
But from its perspective, that's not, everything converges, because it has its metaphorical fingers in every
Right.
metaphorical pie.
The inherent intelligence and the radiance are the same thing.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if you want to split hairs in terms of referring to it, you could say that the inherent intelligence refers to the active, purposeful, functional nature of reality. And you could say the radiance refers to the manifest effects of the functioning of reality. But of course they're one and the same, so that whole thing doesn't really hold water. But nonetheless, you could say it if you want, from a theoretical point of view.
Yeah, I get it.
The inherent intelligence is doing the radiance, but then the radiance is doing itself, and the inherent intelligence is doing itself. So we're kind of splitting hairs. But you can stumble on one or the other, and then when you look at it closely, you discover the other. You can stumble on the inherent intelligence, and you look at it, and oh my God, you discover all this phenomena that it is doing because it is. Or you can look at the phenomena, and when you look at the phenomena, you discover, oh my God, this is being very purposefully,
right.
danced, orchestrated by this astounding potency that it turns out to be.
Right.
So again, there's not just two things,
Right.
but you could, as a sort of a point of contact or an initial jumping off point of what you stumble on,
You're
there
right,
can seem
right.
to be sort of this flavor or that flavor, even though they ultimately, or not even ultimately, they immediately converge.
Yeah, right, yeah. Well, that's what I was sort of seeing, like this morning, the radiance. I mean, just the fact that the radiance is appearing, since it's appearing out of the totality, then it's like pure intelligence is appearing.
Yeah, it's pure intelligence. It's being done with inconceivable precision and purposefulness.
Yeah.
In an inconceivably bizarre way.
Yeah.
In a way that just makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, you just sit back and marvel at it. I mean, you don't have to do anything.
No, it's because in its being, everything is being done. Everything is already done.
Yeah.
There's
right.
nothing. There's no subsequent processing necessary. There's nothing unresolved that then needs to be
Right. Yeah.
put together or compensated for.
You're right.
Just in the instant of it shining forth, of it appearing, that everything is completely accomplished.
Right.
No, there's no residue, there's no remainder.
Right.
And that's always and continually and eternally the case.
Yeah, that's the inherent intelligence, the completeness of everything.
Yeah. Which is also liberation from karma, because when you discover that everything is absolutely complete, just in the instant of its apparition, there's nothing that needs to be done or not.
Yeah, right.
Miller time.
Right. I mean, there's no eating. I mean, you don't have to sit back and second guess it and try to micromanage it.
No.
It's perfect all the time, 24/7.
Yeah.
You know, the way you're putting this, I've been sitting here listening, and there's this dichotomy that everyone is speaking, including you, as though there's this person who is seeing this radiance. There's no such thing as that dyad.
No, of course. The radiance sees itself, which can look like a person seeing whatever the person seems to be seeing.
And when you see it, it's like Pam was saying earlier, you recognize it in a sense, but you also recognize that that's what you've always, it's always been you, it's always been you, it's always been this.
It recognizes itself, and it recognizes that it's always been doing nothing other than recognizing itself eternally.
And there's no external seeing.
Of course not.
That's where this sense, when I said it was sort of muscular, I mean, it's sort of
powerful.
It's just,
all it is. It's all that is. It's all there is. It's all you've ever been.
Yeah, radiant presence. That's what we got. The eternal yoga of radiant presence.
Astounding that
radiant presence doing its asanas.
That forgetting happens, or apparent forgetting happens. So fucking fantastic, man.
Yeah.
Dude.
I was thinking just a little bit more about this perfection, and I wanted to ask you, is it, everything that happens is that, and everything that happens is perfect. Is it perfect because it is its own nature? Because the expressions of it can sort of not look perfect in a certain way. My interpretation of it can look kind of like awe.
Yeah. Well, it's perfect because it is always itself. It's always. It's never unfinished. It is completely itself.
Right.
And that's its starting point. That's its middle, and that's its end. So there's nothing being gained or developed or achieved or not.
Right. Yeah.
On the other hand, the nature of its nature, which is perfect, is also inherently. What's a word for it? What's a good word? It's incomplete. It's an inherent incompleteness.
Right.
It's like, dividing by zero. It's out of balance with itself. It doesn't. In other words, if it was in absolute equilibrium with itself, it would sort of cancel itself out and shut down in a way. This is all metaphorically speaking.
Oh yeah, right.
But it isn't. It's like a continually breaking wave.
Right.
Continually breaking wave has to be out of balance. If it was in balance, it would just be calm water sitting there.
All of it is in balance.
Yeah.
But it's all dynamic.
It's nature is dynamism, and this what we call dynamism is evidence of what I'm trying to, what it cannot be described or defined, and yet which I'm sort of metaphorically referring to as an intrinsic disequilibrium or
Right.
intrinsic. It's like a.
Yeah.
It's like it's not a circle; it's more of a spiral.
Right. Yeah.
So it's not inherently in a condition of stasis which tends to damp itself down. On the contrary, it's in a condition of sort of dynamic disequilibrium,
Right.
which tends to continually and eternally stir itself up
Right. Yeah.
without ever departing from itself or without ever actually being incomplete.
Right.
And
Yeah.
yet it has an internal dynamism which we experience as all this event, and this incompleteness shows up as the irresolution of all conditions. Nothing is ever resolved. No problems are ever solved. It just goes from endless, if you look at the flow of events, it goes from endless failure to endless failure to endless failure. Everything falls apart, and then more shit comes along, and it falls apart, and more shit comes along, and nothing ever the bell is never actually rung. It's always like, well, almost, no, but fuck that one, here's another chance, almost, is it going to come together? Nope, doesn't.
Yeah.
Why don't you get rid of expectations?
Yeah, but you see, the point is that this, what looks from a human level like continual ongoing failure, is actually its transcendental, dynamic completeness, which is intrinsically. There's a good image for it that I'm not really hitting on.
Kinetic?
The word, of course it's kinetic, but it's not that it's unbalanced, that it's incomplete, that it's an open-endedness is a good way to put it. But it's an open-ended that tends, divergent. It doesn't tend to converge.
Mm-hmm.
So if it tended to converge, it would be a system that would sort of find peace. It would dampen itself down. But on the contrary, it's endlessly moving away from itself. This is all very metaphorical because you can't say what it actually is. I'm just vaguely referring to it poetically.
Right. Yeah.
But and to me, I think it very clearly and very obviously is this nature that is absolutely complete and, in that sense, perfect.
Yeah. Right.
It needs nothing. It gains and can gain nothing, and yet, by its very nature, it is a kind of a dynamic disequilibrium.
Yeah.
Continually, it's like an ever-breaking wave, just ever-breaking, 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 and it doesn't tend to converge into a non-breaking condition or something.
Right, yeah.
And so all phenomena whatsoever that we think of as phenomena, which includes our thoughts and ideas and feelings and physical phenomena, what have you, are all in evidence of this continual irresolution, this continual dynamic irresolution.
Right.
The way everything just continually sort of builds up as if it's building to something and then falls apart. Never quite makes it to anywhere in particular.
So I was thinking, like, for example, there's a car accident. Like, if there's a car accident out on the street, you could say, well, if you looked at it just in terms of energy, it would be a perfect expression of energy. But if you look at it in terms of a car accident, like your idea of a car accident, it can look pretty strange.
Yeah.
But is that phenomena also, that phenomena is also perfect, and it's
of course, all phenomena, of course.
Yeah, so it applies to all phenomena on all levels.
Absolutely.
So your thought level of what you think is going on, it also applies to that.
Yeah, because there are no actual phenomena. What we label as phenomena is arbitrary grouping of sets which aren't really sets.
Right.
Like we look at a car crash and you think of it as being a car crash, but it's not a car crash. It's a random assortment of absolutely disparate energy events which are completely divergent.
Right.
And there's actually no cars and no crash and no chain of events that is being called that.
Yeah. So it's not worthwhile to really sort of interpret it in terms of what your mind thinks it
never.
It is.
Never, ever.
That doesn't work. But on a deeper level, you could say what you were saying about completeness and disequilibrium.
Yeah, you can see the radiance, and the nature of the radiance is this continual, coming forth as as seeming virtual systems
Yeah.
that never achieve stasis or stability or completeness.
Yeah, right. Well, a car crash, even to call it a car crash, is sort of disequilibrium or something.
Everything is, yeah.
Sort of like a dynamic.
You look at all events. All event is a complete, disequilibrium.
Right, yeah.
But narrating is an event. Narrating
All that, sure. All that in mind, of course.
meaningless,
Right.
but it's nonetheless it's an event.
Yeah.
Delegated to sound or something like that.
Sure, the never-ending flow of thoughts is just more evidence of this dynamic disequilibrium, this ever-breaking wave of.
Right, yeah. That's really good. Thanks. Because you can't make sense out of the radiance, even if you're seeing it very closely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not making sense.
No, because it's incoherent. It doesn't cohere
Yeah.
into actual systems.
Right, yeah.
But you don't have to make sense.
No, of course
And
not.
that's right, yeah. And
And
that's why,
that's the whole point of discovering the radiance. Is then you have clearly verified that it doesn't have to, and in fact cannot make sense.
yeah.
Because there's nothing to make sense. It's a sea of divergent, infinite flashes.
Yeah, but expressing as a perfect expression of whatever actually is,
Yeah, absolutely.
all the time.
Absolutely.
The pristine. I mean, what else could it be? Can't come from anywhere else.
No. All God all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole sorting out thing just starts to end up meaningless, really. And then it's almost like there's a different relationship then with, because nothing has to make sense. There's this kind of, I don't know, sweetness or ease.
Oh yeah. Because it is a fullness that is not dependent upon systems cohering. When you discover the actuality of the way in which incoherence is the case, i.e., you discover the implications of that there are no real systems, there are no real entities, there are no actual conditions. Systems, entities, and conditions are sort of free associated onto, if things could be coherent, then there might be these systems and entities and so on. But in actuality, that's not the case. And when you see the way in which that's not the case, then you discover the way in which there are no systems, entities, or conditions, even though there may or may not have seemings in that direction. And so in that case, there's total okayness because there's no systems to resolve, or not. I mean, the whole thing. There's no macro development that could be succeed or fail.
That seems like that relationship is like a doorway to everything. In a sense, it's you. Well, it's not even a door. It's just something's gone.
An open doorway.
The gate get close.
I think you're on to something.
Well, I think it's just walking. It's just walking.
Yeah.
Trying.
chop wood, carry water, drink hard cider.
A moment of scriptural indulgence here. So, Hanpa talks about circles. When we're back to there, he speaks of circles. And I didn't really understand the small argument, the 2 or 3 sentences of argument. But I took it to mean what you were referring to one time not too long ago, in my case, maybe 2 months ago. That my backyard is full of mandalas. In other words, every point of time or every point of experience is its own circle, its own mandala, its own world that suddenly blows up, and then there's a new point of experience elsewhere because it isn't the same, and it blows up into it. So the whole world is just made of these mandalas. Our experience is made of these circles, and each circle is a world. It explodes into a world, explodes into another world, explodes into another world.
Yeah. And each of those worlds is inclusively the entire universe.
Right.
So any point of focus becomes the center of the universe, inclusive.
Total experience.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, I was just wondering if I'm right, because I don't always understand his line of thought.
Yeah. I don't recall the particular reference, so I can't really say.
It's a brief reference. I don't think he comes back to it. It's a natural perfection. But
yeah. If I saw it, I might be able to say something about it. But if as you say, it's about the whole notion of mandalas in higher Buddhism, in higher Tibetan Buddhism, and especially in Dzogchen, refers very specifically to what you're talking about. The way that experience tends to organize itself as ultimately arbitrary center around which the whole universe seems to coalesce or be apparent. And yet, of course, from the Dzogchen point of view or my point of view, that is more or less a virtual presentation, and it's the nature of it to seem to organize itself that way without anything actually being organized or presented, because it's all, as Dzogchen might say, it's all Dharmakaya, or it's all radiance, or what have you. And that these mandalas are the presentation of that, or the verification of that, because in that context, there are no actual fixed entities or systems. Any arbitrary point becomes the whole entity in the whole system, the whole universe.
Mm-hmm. And before you can get used to one, you've got another one already.
Yeah, and they're absolutely unstable and dynamic, and even indeterminate, because even when they form, they don't actually fall into solid concreteness or coherence. They're more a sort of a virtual implication, and then dreamlike, mirage-like. It seems to be something of anything, and then another one seems to be something, and they don't ever actually stabilize or solidify or, verify as being anything. So they're always sort of mirage-like and dreamlike.
And that's what I was seeing when you talked about a breaking wave.
Yeah.
It's these things breaking into a universe, breaking into a new universe.
Yeah. All these virtual universes, none of which actually ever cohere or stabilize or concretize.
And they're not related to each other.
No, because they're just virtual. They're like dreams. They're like fantasies.
Snowflakes.
There's nothing. Yeah, there's nothing actually there. It's like free associating on a Rorschach blot.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like anything's actually there. It's just a random blot. But the nature of the inherent intelligence, the intelligence of experience, is that it tends to fall into these sort of virtual, seeming panoramas of organization. They can have inconceivable detail and virtual coherence. But again, if you look closely, they don't actually concretize or stabilize or gain any actual coherence. But endlessly, this sort of endless, panorama of seeming making sense, seeming to be coherent, seeming to be whole universes.
Time is our idea of trying to organize those into some kind of sequence.
Oh yeah, it's your time, and all the various organizational schemes and the parameters that people generally hold to be absolutes are all just implications of trying to pull it all together into something coherent. But ultimately, it's all fantasy, essentially. It's not the information is there. The experiential characteristics are there, but they aren't they don't resolve into specificity. They're more implications of characteristics than actual characteristics. So everything that one experiences, all this inconceivable detail of experiential characteristics, if you go looking for what anything actually is, it just starts to get very weird. It doesn't actually. You can't actually find anything. It doesn't actually come together into coherence or stability or solidity. So all of this inconceivable precision of detail is actually very dreamlike and it's more implication than actual. Even though it is actual, but it's an actual mirage. It's an actual, innuendo. It's a field of infinite innuendo. Sound and fear signifying nothing.
That never changes.
No, it never. Well, that is the condition. Never changes.
Yeah.
And that's about quitting time. So, good night, online people.